The rumor began with a smirk, a cigar, and a line overheard by a spy who didn't even know he was listening to history unfold. In late 1941, as Nazi Germany stood triumphant across Europe, Albert Speer, head of German armaments, presented Hitler with a report suggesting that the United States was preparing to build an aircraft factory so large it seemed ridiculous, if not impossible. Hitler scanned the page, scoffed, and waved it off with a laugh that echoed in the marble halls of the Reich Chancellery. Americans, he declared, are good at bluster. Nothing more. Let them try. According to later testimonies, he added a line more acidic than strategic: let them attempt their big barn. They will never build planes in a barn. What Hitler dismissed was not a barn. It was the beginning of a revolution in warfare, a facility that would rise from muddy Michigan farmland and ultimately produce more aircraft than entire nations had during the war. It would be the bomber factory that made the Luftwaffe bleed, that crushed German industry, and that forced Hitler's boastful dismissal back down his throat. But in December 1941, that future was invisible. What existed then was only a blueprint on Henry Ford's desk, a furious disagreement between the government and the auto titan, mechanical chaos waiting to become order, and a construction site famous for mud, failure, and mockery. Ford wanted nothing to do with the war. His company had built tractors, cars, and peace propaganda. He had spent decades insisting war was avoidable if nations simply learned to talk like gentlemen. Yet, he was also a man with an obsession. He wanted to prove that the same assembly methods that made Ford cars could make Ford bombers. His engineers pleaded with him that airplanes were too complicated, too delicate, too handcrafted to be built like Model Ts rolling down a mechanized line. Aircraft builders relied on artisans, riveters, machinists, and craftsmen who worked with micrometer precision. Airplanes couldn't, according to the entire aviation industry, be mass-produced. Ford insisted otherwise. If we can build a car every 50 seconds, he said during an early meeting, why not a bomber every 50 minutes? The room went silent. 50 minutes. No factory in the world could build a bomber in a single hour. Many factories required weeks, even months, of precision work to build one. And even then, components came from countless subcontractors. Ford didn't care. He wanted to build them himself, from raw aluminum to finished war machine, all under one roof. A roof so vast, engineers joked it would need its own weather report. And so, against all caution, the factory was approved. Its name would soon become legendary: Willow Run. The land chosen for the project was farmland, mostly soybeans and corn, soft and soggy after the autumn rains. Engineers walked the fields and were horrified. The soil was unstable, terrible for heavy foundations. Ford's representatives shrugged. We'll fix it. The county had no proper roads to handle thousands of daily workers. We'll pave them. There weren't enough skilled laborers. We'll train them. Aircraft companies doubted the venture. We'll show them. Even the U.S. military wasn't convinced. They wanted bombers, lots of them, but they quietly bet on other manufacturers like Consolidated Aircraft, Boeing, and Douglas. They viewed Ford's attempt as an experiment. But Ford wasn't alone. Consolidated Aircraft would supply engineers, blueprints, and oversight. The bomber chosen for production was the B-24 Liberator, the most modern heavy bomber in the world. Fast, long-ranged, complex, and notoriously difficult to build. With oddly shaped fuselages, thousands of intricate parts, and wiring that snaked like veins through a mechanical body, the B-24 was practically handcrafted. Even veteran aviation factories struggled to piece them together. And Ford wanted to assemble them like refrigerators. Construction at Willow Run was chaotic from the start. Bulldozers sank axle-deep in mud. Workers complained the swampy ground swallowed tools. Engineers fought with contractors as the building plan changed weekly. Roads had to be laid, rail lines extended, power grids expanded. Everything had to be done simultaneously. The factory grew so large that workers sometimes needed bicycles to get from one end to the other. It would eventually stretch nearly a mile long, with ceilings high enough to swallow a cathedral. Hitler never saw photos of this madness. If he had, he might have laughed even harder. But slowly, miraculously, the structure took shape, a giant, L-shaped fortress of steel and glass. Its sheer size was staggering. It looked like an aircraft carrier that had run aground in a Michigan cornfield. Inside, Ford planned something the world had never seen, a true aircraft assembly line. Parts would move from station to station, from raw aluminum sheets to ribs, spars, engines, hydraulics, wires, wings, turrets, glass panels, gearboxes, fuel tanks, nav systems, and finally, fully operational bombers. Even then, skeptics whispered that the plan was delusional. Early results seemed to prove them right. The first months of production were a disaster. Ford workers, car builders accustomed to simplicity and repetition, now had to master aircraft assembly. They struggled with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Rivets were misaligned. Electrical harnesses were installed backwards. Fuselage skins buckled under improper riveting. Wings sometimes failed inspections 3 or 4 times before passing. Production crawled. The military grew impatient. Where are the planes? They demanded. Ford promised improvements. But when the first B-24 rolled off the line, it was late and riddled with issues. Rival manufacturers snickered. Aviation executives muttered, "We told them so." Shortly after, a grim joke circulated. If Willow Run keeps this up, the war will be over before their second plane is finished. Hitler would have loved that joke. Yet something was changing behind the factory's giant windows, something no one outside could see. Ford had unleashed an army of problem solvers. Thousands of engineers, draftsmen, metallurgists, line workers, supervisors, and efficiency experts. They worked around the clock, sleeping in offices, eating at their stations, rewriting procedures, redesigning jigs, fixing tooling, and standardizing every operation. They fought chaos with relentless organization. Bit by bit, the line sped up. Defects dropped. Training programs improved. Ford machinists refined aircraft parts with automotive speed. Racks for storage were redesigned, supply routes optimized, assembly steps simplified. Even the workers' dormitories, built because rural Michigan lacked housing, became hubs of discipline and morale. Then winter came. Snow piled against the factory walls. Inside, the sounds never stopped. Riveting, hammering, welding, engines being tested on roaring stands that shook the floors. And slowly, the impossible began to look inevitable. By mid-1943, Willow Run was producing bombers so fast the aviation world was stunned. 8 planes a day, then 10, then 12, and each month the pace increased. Ford's assembly line was now a juggernaut. A B-24 bomber took 55,000 parts, 5 miles of wiring, and hundreds of workers. At Willow Run, it moved down the line in a slow-motion dance of precision and sweat, every piece sliding into place like clockwork. Suddenly, competitors who once mocked Ford turned silent. By late 1943, Willow Run achieved the unthinkable. 1 bomber every 63 minutes. Hitler had mocked the factory. Now he was feeling its sting. Those bombers, sleek, long-ranged, menacing, flew across the Atlantic by the hundreds. Each one carried bombs into the heart of German industry. They destroyed rail yards, oil fields, factories, refineries, bridges, submarine pens, tank plants, ball-bearing works, and chemical facilities. They pummeled the Luftwaffe every time it took to the skies. They stretched German air defenses thin. They burned fuel the Reich could not spare, consumed pilots they couldn't replace, and erased weapons they hadn't finished building. Every B-24 was a blow to Hitler's dream of air supremacy. And Willow Run built over 8,000 of them. More than entire nations, more than Britain, Germany, and Japan produced individually. It became the single greatest bomber factory in history. German intelligence began intercepting reports that shocked them. An aerial reconnaissance photo, smuggled through back channels, showed a monstrous facility stretching into the horizon, its parking lots filled with thousands of workers' cars. A Luftwaffe general allegedly muttered, "My God, it's a city." It wasn't a city, it was a war machine. Hitler's mockery began to fade as his air force withered. The once fearsome Luftwaffe, which had crushed Poland, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Yugoslavia, Norway, and Greece, was now bleeding daily. Every time they scrambled fighters to defend German skies, B-24 squadrons unleashed devastation. The Luftwaffe could no longer rest, rebuild, or recover. Willow Run didn't just supply bombers, it supplied relentless pressure. By 1944, Germany's fuel reserves collapsed under constant raids. Even the synthetic oil plants, the Reich's lifeline, were erased. Pilots often reached the front lines with barely enough fuel for a single short sortie. Some German bases shut down entirely. Planes were grounded, engines drained, and units dissolved. It became clear. The assembly line Hitler mocked was crushing the Luftwaffe's spine. Ford engineers sometimes walked through Willow Run and stared at the rows of bombers rolling toward daylight. Each one glowed with polished aluminum, its propellers painted black, its wings stretching wide like something alive. Workers signed their names on internal panels, small signatures hidden under wire bundles or beneath the cockpit floor. They knew their planes would fly into danger. Many prayed over them before shipping. And those bombers flew everywhere: Italy, England, Africa, the Pacific, the Mediterranean. They hunted U-boats along the Atlantic. They smashed Japanese shipping in the East Indies. They dropped supplies over Burma. They struck oil fields in Romania and Germany. They hit ball-bearing plants in Schweinfurt, tank factories in Kassel, and shipyards in Hamburg. Everywhere they flew, the echo of Willow Run followed. A bomber crewman once said, "We knew those planes came from the place that built them faster than the Germans could shoot them down." It wasn't just speed. Willow Run became a symbol of American industrial might, proof that the United States could outbuild any empire, outproduce any dictator, and overwhelm any force that dared threaten the world. Germany's defeat was not won solely by soldiers. It was won by riveters, welders, machinists, and men and women who worked night shifts under fluorescent lights, never seeing the skies their work would dominate. By 1945, as Berlin crumbled and the Luftwaffe existed only in name, even former skeptics admitted the truth. Willow Run had buried Hitler's air force. After the war, journalists asked former German officials whether they'd known about the factory Hitler mocked. Some said yes, others admitted they had dismissed it. A few confessed they never believed the Americans would succeed. "It was a joke to us," one said. "We thought Ford was building a circus tent." He paused. Then the bombers came. Willow Run eventually closed, its war purpose fulfilled. The great factory fell silent. But its legacy endured. Not in the machinery left behind, but in the shattered remains of the Luftwaffe, in the free skies over Europe, and in the history books that would later reveal how one mocked idea reshaped the world. Ford's dream had been ridiculed by aircraft designers, military officials, foreign intelligence, and even Hitler himself. Yet that dream produced more bombers than any facility on Earth. And in doing so, it changed the war. The factory Hitler mocked, dismissed as a fantasy, a joke, a barn, became the very machine that buried his air force, shattered his strategy, and proved that in total war, innovation is the mightiest weapon of all. Its mile-long assembly lines produced not just bombers, but victory. And its workers, armed with rivet guns instead of rifles, became the quiet soldiers who helped save the world.